So I have 6:27, Saida.
Okay. I'll start right at 6:30.
Okay, I don't know what's wrong with this thing. So I've got 6:29. I'm just looking to see, Michelle is here. Kimberly's here. And John McClement is here. But nobody else from the board.
Do you
We're
want
gonna
to wait?
start.
Are we still
No,
starting?
we're gonna start at 6:30 regardless.
Okay.
I just can't believe that nobody else is here.
Marco's here.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and it's 6:30. Good evening, everyone. A few notes for you, particularly if this is your first meeting with us. You'll notice that you are muted and unable to unmute yourself, excuse me. After each presentation, co-chairs of the committee will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can ask to be recognized by raising your virtual hand, and you can do that by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. It's important not to raise your physical hands or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you among the participants. If you're on a phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute. Once you're recognized by a co-chair, I'll unmute you and you may be prompted to confirm unmuting on your device. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you can access the raise hand feature by clicking the participants button on the menu at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. The chat function is available for technical support only, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. You can send me a chat if you're having any trouble and I can walk you through any issues you may be having. Jane? I think we might have lost Jane. Okay, give me a moment while Jane reconnects.
She's reconnecting right now.
Thanks, well, I saw.
Okay, cool.
Jane, you should see something to unmute. on your device.
Applicant here for the Metropolitan?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead. I'm having some problems with my internet connection, but just so you know, the interior of the Metropolitan Museum, the Great Hall, is an interior landmark. There are very few of them in New York City. And so I want everyone to pay close attention to this application. Do you want to do a screen share, Brett?
Yeah, hi, Jane. Yes, I'd like to share my screen if that's okay with all
Thank
of you.
Yes, go ahead. You should have
Sure,
the
go ahead.
capability.
Okay, let's see. Okay, can everybody see my screen and hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, we can. And
Wonderful.
are you from Buyer Blinger Bell? Are you the architect or?
So
representing-
I'm the head of capital planning at the Met,
Oh,
and we're working
Okay,
with the architects, and we'll be presenting the project tonight.
okay, you will be presenting. Okay,
I'll be presenting the project.
okay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for making time for us today. This is a fairly small, but as you said earlier, important project for us, not only because of its location in the Great Hall, but also because this is one of the few interior landmarks in the city. And I think you can probably hear there's some thunder happening behind me, so I'm sorry about the noise. And so I'm just going to take you through the existing conditions, which many of you are probably very familiar with, given your location and adjacency to the Met, and then talk about our proposal. And our proposal is fairly straightforward. It's to install 4 digital displays within the Great Hall on either side, the north side and the south side. So 2 on the north side and 2 on the south side. If you visited the Met in the past 18 months, you've probably already seen digital displays installed. That's because we got a temporary permit from Landmarks to install these digital displays during the COVID-19 crisis. And it was very helpful for us to be able to get information to our visitors in a changing environment, so that when visitors came into the museum, we could have updated guidelines and information for them and change it frequently without having staff come in and reprint and constantly be hanging new information. So the screens are there, and we would like to make them permanent, but with a few minor changes, which I'll go over. And feel free, I can't see everybody, so just interrupt me if you have a question, and then I can also stop sharing and talk at the end too. So this is a first floor plan of the entire Metropolitan Museum of Art, but as you can see shaded in peach, this is the area that is the interior landmark space. Zooming in on that a little bit more closely, you can see here the information desk and this kind of, can you see my hand moving around? I'm kind of showing, okay. This rectangle here is the area underneath the 3 big domes in the Great Hall. And the space that we're talking about is in these adjacent sides on the north side and on the south side, which are vestibules behind a colonnade, and have plaster walls. And that's the area where we would like to permanently have the screens. This is an elevation just showing what that main space is like. And then this vestibule space on one side and on the other side. And then these are just some fun historic views of the Great Hall over time from 1902, and we'll move through the present. You can always see that there's the kind of main space and then the auxiliary space behind the colonnades, which originally in Richard Morris Hunt's time, it was outside on the other side of that. But when McKim and White added their additions on both sides, it became gallery space. Let me just go to the next slide. You can see here another series of photographs from 1917, 1940s, 1992. Kevin Roche had some incredible benches and plants. The information desk was on little legs, and then it became more permanent. And then a photograph from 2023. And in this photograph, you can see the temporary display screens, one on the right and one on the left. And I think this photograph is looking south. These are just some photographs of a project that happened in 2019 and 2020, where the Met removed these booths that used to be in front of the colonnades on either side, actually on 3 sides of the Great Hall. And you can see behind a static poster that was on the wall where we used to display information. As part of the removal of these ticketing desks, we created one large ticketing hall that's outside of the interior landmark designated space, the Great Hall. This project was reviewed with landmarks, but did not require a public hearing. And in this project, we created a ticketing desk and a digital display that displays information. So this has worked quite well for us. It has ticketing prices and information about exhibitions. And so the proposed design is kind of the next step of this, which is to have information that can change, not be animated. So it's not that information would be moving or changing all the time, but information that acts as a poster in a digital way that can change on a daily basis or on a weekly basis as programs change at the museum. And so this is the location. There is 2 on the north side, and 2 on the south side or south, and 2 on the north side. And so what we're coming to you today for approval of is for the permanent mounting of the digital displays in these 4 locations. There's no change to the floor plan of the Great Hall at all. Everything stays the same. These are mounted to the walls and they're entirely reversible. So we're mounting them to plaster walls, not to stone. And in the future, if we chose to take them down or if technologies change, we would take them down and patch and paint the wall. This is what it looks like in elevation. So there's a proposed screen on the left, a proposed screen on the right. The data and power is already there. So the actual impact of the historic fabric is just the anchor holes to mount the screens to the wall. That's looking at I'm sorry, this is looking, let me just go back. This is a plan and elevation of the north side. And then this is just a view of what the screens how they'll be programmed. The idea is that there will be 3 bays on each screen. And we can display information about tours and about what's happening on a daily basis, as well as maps and exhibitions that are happening. We actually looked at doing 3 separate screens on either side, so they really looked more like posters, but that was actually more disruptive to the historic fabric than just doing 1 screen on either side that was divided in this way. On the bottom in this elevation, the red dashed line that you see is where the temporary display screens are now. And now they've been up for long enough under the temporary permit that we have studied how they work, and we know that they're working and that our visitors are using them, and our visitor experience team, sorry, very loud thunder. Our visitor experience team says that they're very beneficial and helpful with getting our visitors through the space and understanding what's happening. But we would like to go to a slightly smaller screen and center them more on the wall as opposed to having them so close to the opening. We think it looks better. They're less prone to damage. And we've also changed the mounting detail so that it's a little bit closer to the wall. So we can look at that too. This is just an elevation showing the red dash line where they are now temporarily, and the gray hatched area where we'd like to move them permanently. Just go. It looks like the drawing's loading. I apologize. But so you can see the elevation and the plan. So this is the plan on the elevation above for the south side. And it's the same on both the south side and the north side. This is the north side. I apologize. My computer is loading very slowly with the line drawings, but it's a mirror image of what's happening on the south side. And so you can see here, there's an existing power and data box already. And what we're asking for permission to do is mount the bracket to the wall and have the display screen in front of it. So this is a view showing the temporary display screen installation. And what we're proposing to do is make them slightly smaller and center them more on the wall, but otherwise they would be in the general location that they're shown in this photograph. This is a more zoomed in version looking south. You can see the screen, the temporary screen that's there now. a view from the side of the temporary screen. It was protruding a little bit too much from the wall. We didn't like the way it looked, so we came up with a different mounting solution with Beyer Blender Bell that gets it a little bit closer to the wall. And then this is a photo montage showing the proposed display screens. As you can see, it's not a huge difference in terms of what's there now versus what we're proposing, but it does center it on the wall, and it's a slightly smaller screen. Just another view showing the ticketing hall, and then a view of the kiosks and the screens beyond. And then the detail of what the mount that we're proposing. So this is the mount that would be attached to the wall in 4 locations, and the screens would be attached to the mount. So that is the presentation. I'll stop sharing, but I'm happy to put it back up on the screen and answer any questions. I think, Jane, I see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. Is there anyone from the public who wants to comment on the application? Anyone here from the public? If not, Saida, we're going to go right to the committee in alphabetical order.
Okay. Elizabeth?
I can't say I'm thrilled with this idea, but I think if they're going to do it, I think behind on the north and south wall, behind the columns, and it's probably the best way that they can do such a thing, and we can't require that a building of this age, which is certainly before computers, dictates entirely what a functioning museum should have. So I think this rises to the level of an acceptable solution.
Thank you. Next, we have Gail.
I agree with Elizabeth. I have actually seen the screens. And one thing that I noticed is that even though people can get printed handouts, that visitors constantly seem to be standing in front, taking advantage. And as much as we would probably like something that wasn't digital for the Met, I do think it serves a purpose for its visitors, so I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, you're next.
Yeah, I find it very disturbing. Let me ask you, why, when you installed it originally, why wasn't it centered? What was the decision that made it off center?
Oh, you're on mute. Yeah. You did.
There you are.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's so at the time when they had first started thinking about the display screens, we were actually going to have mobile desks in front of the screen. So if you've been to the Met recently, when you walk in the door to the right, there's a membership desk that's ticketing, that's on wheels, and it's in the Great Hall. And that can actually break into 2 parts. And initially that was going to be in front of those 2 locations, which would have caused a huge traffic jam and all kinds of issues. And so the thought was that the screens would kind of be closer to the middle so that you could see them above the heads of the people at those desks. And so that's why they were temporarily put there. A lot of the kind of agility during the COVID crisis was just trying to figure out the best way to get people separated and into the museum safely. So that's why they were put there. After now having looked at it and thought about it and realized we're never going to put desks there again, And we've had one of the screens damaged by visitors getting too close to it when they're coming through the door. The decision was made to actually center them on the wall. We don't have to move the data and power because it can get to the location. It's not that far away. But we felt like the screens looked better centered on the wall and slightly smaller and closer to the wall. And that they would be less likely to be damaged if they were there. So that's why.
Okay, thank you. Look, I know that giving visitors an option to get their information via these screens is a very nice courtesy to your visitors. It'll also cause visitors to congregate around them. But I don't think that your visitors need to be so spoon-fed. I think that with your printed material, there are many tourists and people who haven't been there, but there are many repeat visitors. And I just think it's overkill. And it's disturbing to have these visually intrude on this magnificent space. And I don't really see the need for it. It might be a nicety for your visitors. It might, give them some additional ability to get information or an alternative way to get information, but I don't think they need to be so spoon-fed. So I would be opposed to it. Also, did I get the measurements right? Was it about 2 feet by 6 feet? Is that what I'm getting?
Let me pull it back up so I can clarify that. 1 second. Just while I'm getting the exact dimensions for you. So 6 feet by
2 plus
by 3'6". So 3'6" this way. 6 feet.
Okay, and by 6. Okay, so from across the Great Hall or from midpoint, since you have it in either direction, and since you have it divided into 3 spaces with the text being a certain font, I don't think that visitors can necessarily see it from afar anyway. And I think you're encouraging them to congregate, excuse me, around this, where in fact they can get individual printouts, which I assume you're doing anyway. This is not replacing that. This is supplementing it. So actually, I would be opposed. I think it's visually disturbing and I don't see the need. Sorry. Thank you.
Could I just have one clarification point about the printed materials? I don't know if it's appropriate now. I'm also happy to wait.
I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, so these aren't meant to your point, replace any printed materials. It's meant to supplement and also, but at the same time, limit our need to print things that are about daily events or weekly events, because it was a significant waste of paper and staff time to be constantly printing materials. The example we put up on the screen for we're open late on Friday night, for example, is something that's really helpful for us to tell our visitors in this space so that they know we're open till 9 p.m. and it's not something that we would print. So while it's not replacing it, it's definitely supplementing it in a way to let our visitors know what's going on a daily basis as opposed to a monthly basis. Or
I understand that, but I think that policy has been in place for a very long time and would probably be part of your usual brochure on whatever time frame you do printed, whether it be monthly or whatever. I mean, I understand your point. I just don't think that the drawback, I don't think the benefit outweighs the drawback for me. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. We're going to move along. Who's next, Aida?
Next, we have Alita.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I joined late, however, so if this was covered, I apologize. But to me, and I understand the need for this, to me, I'm wondering why they're not on the walls adjacent to the 2 shops that you have in the Great Hall where they're already part of a commercial thing. And then my other point would be the colors, because I see this on the exterior of St. Ignatius Loyola Church. The colors are pretty bright and one might say garish. So maybe it's possible to just have very muted colors and they wouldn't draw. So people will see that when they're near there. They wouldn't draw the same kind of distracted looking and take away from the beauty of the space. I just think it's so monumental and so magnificent and such a great lead in to the galleries that to have attention focused on that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you're next.
Hi, Brett, I think that your explanation of why the digital boards can serve the public are very compelling, and that not everyone who comes to the Met will have been there before or will be a regular traveler there. And so having information there, especially if it can be translated, I think would be incredibly helpful for visitors to the Met. I'm still not sure how I feel about the placement, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of what my colleagues say, but I do think that the digital boards have an important purpose. And so for me, the question is about the placement rather than whether or not one is used in the Met. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Anthony.
Hi. First, I came a little late to the party, but at least prepared, because I did go through the presentation kind of carefully. I think I'll just say out front, I think they're fine. And I think that actually the location, just in terms of being, let's say, disruptive to the personality of the Great Hall and to the landmark spaces, is minimal, or as minimal as any digital signage can be. The only thing that I would worry about ever so slightly, and I apologize if that was covered in the presentation, is that the location of all 4 signboards, which are at major entrances to the galleries, will cause traffic problems. Not that they're obtrusive, not that it's a problem, because I think actually this is the least obtrusive location. But I would be a little concerned about traffic problems after people have queued up and they've gone through the tickets or security or whatever, and then there are people who are trying to read the digital map or the announcements. Anyway, that would be my only concern. I think otherwise they're fine. They're big, but ironically, they are in no way out of scale with the spaces that for which you are proposing them. Okay, that's it.
I'd be happy to answer that now, or I can wait.
No, go ahead, please.
So I think just a few comments on that. We did do a lot of work with Buyer Blindard Bell on the location and impact to historic fabric in the Great Hall. And to your point, those are plaster walls. They're not limestone walls. So that was a big part of the reason why we decided to mount them there. As part of our due diligence on this, before we decided to make them permanent, we did do some analysis of whether people were congregating there or if they were causing issues, or if in fact they were in the right place for our visitors, because as you can imagine, it's an arduous process to go through a public hearing. And we said, listen, we're about to embark on this. Do you want to keep the screens there? Are they working where they are? Should we rethink where they are? And what we've learned is that they're working quite well where they are, because the way that they're doing queuing, people, if they need to see information, can step aside and look, but it's not causing a bottleneck to get into the galleries beyond what we already have with just checking everybody's ticket. So they haven't been causing congestion as we actually thought they may as well when we first put them there.
Thank you.
Next, we have Marco.
Thank you. Without no doubt, this is an intrusion of the classic architecture. That's my point. The second point is how you I'm sorry to use that word, manipulate the procedure. That first you approach with a temporary permit, which basically the commissioner make a judgment on that. That I think it helps you to maintain this application. And that probably, I had to add something else. Yes, Gail said that she was visited, and I had to trust her opinion. And according to her, that is fine. So everything, even that I'm in disagreement, I had to give some credit, but at the same time, I don't like to your approach. That first of all, the step by step, you slipped your idea, and you put in the front the commissioner first, and they said it's okay, temporary, and now become permanent. And I think that procedure, that way that it has to be done, I think is wrong. And you should come, even as a temporary, you should come to us to have an opinion. So right now, I'm in the dilemma that the commissioners already say yes. Now, for us, what is left probably is more likely that go in the approval rather than to be in disapproval. But whatever it is, I think I found wrong your approach. And I personally myself, I don't like it, that part. But I don't know what I'm going to do, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
I understand and I hear you. I think, let me just respond to the approach part though, because there was.
No, let's go keep going with the committee. I think we all sort of understand the approach. Thank you.
Okay, next we have John.
I think a lot of thought has gone into this on the part of the management of the Met, and consequently, I would vote in favor of it.
Okay, and Kimberly.
Thank you, Saida. Thank you, Jen. I'm a bit frustrated by the tenor of some of the questions that have been asked, but I will say that I appreciate the points that both Anthony and Alita raised about ways that the positioning of these digital boards could have been placed so that they were maybe slightly less disruptive, but I agree that it's important that they're there, and I appreciate the thoughts that the Met has put into making them as inconspicuous as possible. I think I can support this, but I'm very anxious to hear what Jane has to say.
Oh, Kimberly, passing the torch to me. First of all, I just wanted to make a comment about something that John said that management might have has probably given this a great deal of thought. We're here for the context and appropriateness of this individual landmarked interior space. And we really can't take into consideration anything that management might have thought. As you know, all of these cultural institutions are suffering at the gate. They are not getting the same level of visitors that they got pre-pandemic. And I'm sure this is one of the reasons why the Met wants to make these installations of these digital signboards permanent, because they need to get people in there and they need to get people to visit as many exhibitions as possible within that wonderful institution. On a personal level, I'm totally opposed to any kind of electronic signboard, yet I recognize it's the wave of the future. Every institution is going to be doing this, not just the Metropolitan Museum. The Metropolitan Museum is different. It has to come to us because that interior space is landmarked. Most museums, most cultural institutions do not have an interior landmark and will not come because it's the future and will happen regardless. As I think Marco said, the commission has already approved of these, the temporary installation of these signboards. I think we have to consider that the Met is not installing them into any of the historic fabric that's in the Great Hall. They're being installed into plaster. And I think we just have to, in one instance, go for progress. And this is a progress within these institutions. So in spite of my personal feelings, I will support the application. Thank you.
Jane, if I could just say just sort of like two other quick things.
Sure.
And one is that, one is that I think not only is this a kind of, and again, I don't know if this was part of the presentation, not only are the electric signboards sort of important to get people in, but one of the things they do is they reduce the dependence on paper. So hopefully the museum can stop printing maps that people get to find exhibits and then throw away. And what do you mean no? Yes. And I think that I don't think that this is a bad thing. And I don't think that these are particularly obtrusive within the landmark space. And I think that changes, I think as Jane pointed out, changes to museums and the way we look at museums and the way we find our way are changing. And I don't think that it's inappropriate. And I think just one more tiny thing to Marco's point, I think asking the fact that the quarrel about asking for a temporary approval is not a quarrel with the museum. They did the right thing. It's that the Landmarks Preservation Commission doesn't insist that even the temporary installation would come to us. I'm done, sorry.
Thank you, Anthony. And I think the young lady from the Met, Brett, made the point that this would impact having to print so much paper. And that would be very helpful to the institution and to the ecology movement. So I think, does anybody want to formulate a resolution? Alita, I see your hand is up.
Well, I have a question, and then I would propose a resolution. Is that okay, Jane?
Sure, sure.
So my question is, will there be other signage like this around the museum? Because the reason I was shaking my head no to Anthony is that the museum is confusing and complicated. And I have been there so many times and I still get lost looking for things. So I can't imagine that people will look at the sign, say, oh, I want to go see South Pacific native artifacts and find their way there, and then say, I'd like to see William the hippopotamus, and find their way there without a paper map. And so I'm just wondering if there will be additional things. And I know that that's off topic, so if you don't want to take the time, Jane, that's fine. And also I'd like to propose a resolution in favor of the application as presented.
Thank you, Alita. I think that it is kind of off topic.
Okay.
You know, we're just here to vote on
I
the
know.
installation of the 4 electronic display boards that will be within the Great Hall. I'm sure the museum is avidly planning for more electronic displays elsewhere. So I think your resolution is a resolution to support.
Yes.
So I think we can go to a vote. Saida?
Okay, 1 second while I unmute everyone.
And Anthony seconded, I think. He had thumbs up.
I did.
Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth,
Yes.
Gail,
Yes.
Michelle,
No,
Alita,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Anthony,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Marco,
Yes.
Kimberly.
Yes.
Okay, Jane, 1 second while I tally the vote.
And thank you, Brett.
John.
Oh,
You-
John McClellan. We forgot.
I'm
him.
sorry, John.
That's
What's your
okay.
vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Brett, for your wonderful presentation.
Oh, I can unmute. Thank you. Thank you all for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. So we're going to move along to number 2. Anthony, do you want to handle number 2?
I do
Did you
indeed.
get- Okay,
I have it.
great.
Okay, so the second item on our agenda today, I didn't actually see David's email until just a few minutes ago, is 895 Park Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. John B. Murray is the applicant. And this is an Art Deco style building designed by Sloan and Robertson, built in 1929. And the application is for replacement of existing penthouse windows with new windows, and a new pergola at the 20th floor penthouse terrace facing Park Avenue. And who is here for, okay, Cass for
Yes.
Higgins Queensparth is here.
Good evening. Thank you, Anthony. Cass Stackelberg of Higgins Quaysbarth and Partners. I'm joined by Tim Middleton and Madison Karwecki of John B. Murray Architects. I'm going to run through the presentation, and if you have questions, at least one of the three of us should hopefully be able to answer them. As Anthony mentioned, let me go ahead and hold the presentation up. As Anthony mentioned, the project addresses at 895 Park Avenue, located in the Upper East Side Historic District on the southeast corner of 79th Street and Park Avenue. It's a 20-story apartment building completed in 1929 with a very robust design, 14-story base on 79th and Park, and then a series of setbacks extending up to a masonry enclosure for a water tank up at the upper floors. There are two components, as Anthony mentioned, two components of the application that are in front of you this evening and coming to a public hearing in front of the commissioners, which is now calendared for October 3rd. One is for replacing existing steel windows with new wood windows. And the reason why that element has to go to a public hearing, those new wood windows match almost identically to the historic steel windows, but there is an existing window master plan for the building that only allows for metal replacement windows, not wood replacement windows. So because our client would like to install custom, basically handmade wood windows, because they are not aluminum replacements, that item has to go to a public hearing. And as you'll see in the presentation, the detailing of the wood windows and the dimensions of the windows is actually closer to the originals that they're replacing than the allowable aluminum replacement. So hopefully this is straightforward and simple. And then the other component is for a pergola up on the upper roof, which is a feature commonly seen in buildings of this style and age. And in fact, actually, this building historically had a pergola at the 17th floor, right on the corner of Park and 79th Street. So this is an existing view on the left and a rendered view on the right. You can see the pergola. It's up here on the 20th floor setback. Fairly modest in scale. And the other element, so this is, hopefully you can see my cursor, this is the 19th floor. So some of the 19th floor windows are visible, but because of the setbacks, many of them are not. And then the 20th floor windows are very difficult to see, again, because they're on a setback and one needs to get very far away from the building. So in terms of the visibility of the windows themselves, obviously they'll be painted black like the master plan approval, but those windows can really only be seen from some distance, and they're about 200 feet off the sidewalk as well. Some detailed photographs. Again, this is the Park Avenue elevation. These are windows on the 19th floor, existing steel windows original to the building. And then the 18th floor, just for context, this is a separate apartment below the area of the application, but this just shows you the aluminum replacement windows that have been installed. And these windows, you can see, are tucked in this little notch here in the setback on the Park Avenue elevation. As I mentioned, a historic photograph of the building from 1950. You can see here in the overall photograph, and then the zoomed in view, there was a very large, I refer to it as a pergola, but it actually looks like it's a roofed structure. It's not open like the pergola that we're proposing or ones that you and the commission have seen over the last 5-10 years. But this is seemingly more of a sort of an almost enclosed pergola-like structure that was sitting right on the prominent corner of Park and 79th Street, historically on the top of the building. Turning to some elevations, just showing you where the areas of work are on the building, an existing elevation on the right and a proposed building elevation on the left. So this is the 79th Street elevation. So the area of work is here on the upper tier, upper corner. You can see the window openings and then the pergola in scale quite small on this 20th floor setback. Turning the corner onto Park Avenue, existing building elevation on the left and proposed on the right. Again, The windows that are being replaced are primarily across the Park Avenue elevation, and then you can see the pergola here on that setback. There's also work on the side elevations, the secondary south and east elevations, window replacement as well, shown here, and then within the light court on 79th Street shown here. We have detailed elevations as well, which may be more useful. So existing elevations on the east and west across the top, proposed east and west elevations again. So the proposal in terms of the windows calls for replacing the windows in the multi-light double hung configuration, matching the historic, and then coming around on the north and south sides, the pergola sitting here on the setback terrace looking over Park Avenue. Focusing in now on the windows, this is a page from the 1997 LPC approved master plan for window replacement. And then another sheet from that master plan, which illustrated the existing window here at the center. And this master plan, probably to allow for sort of greater flexibility for the owners, it actually allowed for 2 different replacement windows that have varying dimensions and profiles that actually vary in a greater degree than what we're proposing. And you can see that here perhaps in elevation. So this is the existing steel window. This is our proposed window here. And then these are the 2 approved replacement windows. So again, the existing one is in steel. The approved replacements are aluminum. We're proposing wood in the same finish of black paint as the approval. But you can see a couple of key dimensions. The muntin dimension of the existing is 1 inch. We're proposing a 1-inch muntin. The approved calls for 7/8 inch muntins. The meeting rails, which is this divider between the top and bottom sash, the existing and our proposed window is 1 15/16. And the master plan allowed for a range from 2 inch to 2 3/4 inches. It's almost an inch taller than the existing meeting rail. And similarly up at the head, 2 5/8 at the head of the existing and our proposed window. And the allowable master plan dimension has it up from 3 3/8 almost to 4 inches. So we're well within what's been approved under the master plan. It's again, just the material that varies. Some sectional details, and I'm happy to sort of come back to this if you have more questions. But again, we've got the existing steel window, our proposed window, and then the 2 approved windows. And this is maybe the most significant variation. This is one of the approved aluminum windows that has this 2 3/4 inch tall meeting rail. The approved and the existing and our proposed is 1 15/16. And the profiles, I'll also note, the profiles of the wood windows, it's much easier to match the profile of the steel in wood because this is a custom window. So not only do the dimensions match, but the brick mold and the sash framing, the stiles and rails, all the profiles match the steel windows far better than they do in the aluminum replacement that's approved under the master plan. Jamb sections, similarly, the daylight opening from the side of the opening to the glazing at 2 5/8, we're matching that dimension as well as all the profiles, and that's compared to 3 7/8 or 3.5 inches. So the daylight openings align very nicely in the proposed and match up very well to the existing. So with that, I'll just sort of stop here on the windows and just say that although the materials change, we think that this proposed window is actually closer to the historic steel windows than the allowable aluminum replacements. And I think it's also worth noting that it's likely that the wood windows will last much longer than the aluminum replacements as well. So just turning now to the second component of the application, the pergola. This is a 20th floor plan. Park Avenue runs along here on the proposed and here on the existing, and 79th Street running across the top of the plan. The proposal is for a pergola on this setback. As you'll see in the details, it's held back from the parapets almost 2 feet, and its only structure is anchored down to the terrace itself. There are no attachments back to the building facade. This is that detailed photograph of the historic pergola or enclosure up on the 17th floor that was at the building. And then just a few photographs from some articles that were published in the late 1920s, contemporaneously with the construction of the building, from Vogue and from Arts and Decorations, just illustrating how setback terraces and outdoor living in apartment buildings, it was a sort of a way to sort of sell this concept of outdoor living, particularly for people who were now moving out of row houses and into these larger apartment buildings. And so these articles in Vogue and Arts and Decoration speak to this idea of what was referred to as a mansion in the clouds, and this idea of activating rooftops and setbacks. And so these features find their way into the historic landscape of these large scale apartment buildings, obviously at 895 Park as well. And we see our proposed pergola in that same vein as being a small scale open structure similar to what was there historically. Community Board 8, as well as the Commission, have seen pergolas. This is from a presentation that our office made to you last year for 2 East 88th Street. You supported this pergola, visible from a number of vantage points. And the Commission as well approved this, sort of noting in its findings that these kinds of features are actually typical of buildings of this style and age and scale, and that this pergola, like the one at 895, doesn't require any physical damage to the historic building, nor does it impact any visual qualities of it. So some existing photographs on the 20th floor setback. There's an existing awning there today. It's just a simple brick masonry facade. And you can see these simple decorative cast panels. As you'll see in the elevation, the pergola structure actually sits below that. And we'll be taking the awning off. Some details illustrating the pergola. Again, you can see those decorative medallions here and here. Pergola sits below that at a maximum height of 9'6". In plan, it's pulled away from the parapets on the south, west, and north sides by 1'9". And it sits merely on the deck itself. It's not anchored to the historic facade materials. It's going to be constructed in metal, but it'll have a profile that's similar to what you'd see in a typical wood trellis. And it's going to be painted this sand color, which blends very nicely with the masonry behind it. A few renderings at sort of bird's eye view, just to illustrate it's the open nature of the roof deck of the pergola itself. That in scale, its position here on the 20th floor setback. We've built a mock-up, and these are some current views of the building. The building is undergoing local law 11 work, so there's a scaffold around most of the building, but the top of the building is visible. So we've built a mock-up here, a rendered view here, and then a zoom view of the mock-up, and then a rendered view here. I think recognizing that this building doesn't terminate in a very clean roof, but with the setbacks, this kind of element doesn't really interrupt the massing of the building. It's a fairly complex massing, which has the light court on 79th Street, this other pavilion on the east side, and then these complex setbacks on the upper floors. A view from the south, this is from 78th Street looking northeast, existing with the mock-up on the left, rendered view here on the right, and then detailed views here. You can tell from the rendering that the pergola is going to be painted in a color that does blend very well with the underlying masonry. And then one view a photograph that predates the scaffolding looking east on 79th Street, existing, no mock-up, this predates the mock-up, but a rendered view with the pergola here, and then a detailed zoom view of the pergola here. And of course, the windows being replaced here on the 19th floor and the 20th floor above. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Very clear presentation. Excuse me.
Great.
Very,
good.
and could we, do we have any members of the public, Saida?
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, so then we can go, I guess, to the committee.
Okay. Marco?
Thank you, Anthony. One quick question, one quick comment about the other application. The only thing I'm going to say is when I'm going to one site and I see a map, usually I have like a treasure by myself. Others, they throw to the garbage can. But myself, this is the way to celebrate for one visit to a specific place. Being said that, yeah, the application itself, I think is reasonable. It's good approach. And probably I think it's sustainable. The replacement of metal for wood, I think, is a very good approach and nice. And being these both items located at the 19 and 20 floor, it's very hard to see any changes or anything that actually tell me there is something wrong or something is not much in the project. I think reasonable. I think you present a very good project and I will support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah.
I have no questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Alita?
Thank you. I don't have any questions right now either. And I'm sorry, did you say, except for one quick one, did you say why he wants to use wood instead of metal?
Quality. Wood
I
instead
don't
of
mean aluminum. I don't mean aluminum. I meant steel. The original.
So I think it's really it's quality both in terms of the material, but also just the quality of wood versus metal is preferable from the client from an exterior standpoint, but also from an interior. And a metal clad wood window from Marvin is just not of the same quality as a solid wood window.
I know we usually ask for wood when they want to put in metal, so I can support this. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Michelle.
I'm very happy about the wood windows. We don't usually get that. When you said the steel was original, did you mean original 1929 original, or did you? Oh, you did. Oh,
yeah. So yeah, steel windows are actually a very common window type for commercial buildings, but it's very unusual to see double hung steel windows in residential buildings.
Residential, yeah.
Yeah, the period of the 20s and 30s, there were a lot of steel windows, but yes, they are the original steel windows. And
yeah, oh, that's interesting. And the Marvin window is a beautiful wood window. Anyway, let me just clarify one thing. I can support this, but you said that the pergola was 9 feet 6 inches high. Am I correct?
Yes.
So, but it's not anchored to the building. It's actually standing on the terrace floor.
But it's anchored to the structural slab, but it's not anchored to the facade of the building. So it's anchored down, not into the building.
I'm only asking, it's probably not even our purview, but I was just curious about wind and storm, not having it anchored. You know, I'm happy that it's not invading the fabric of the facade, but from a safety point of view, I imagine you did those studies.
Yeah, so this has been engineered, and it is safe. It is not sitting on the roof. It is anchored to the roof. It's just not anchored to the brick masonry. So it is.
But it's 9 feet high, so it leaves it the ability to move. No?
Not with the 8 legs that it's standing on.
Okay, well, anyway, that's not our purview, but it was just striking to me. How much of it do we see above the parapet?
Go back. So it depends on where you're standing. It's an interesting site because of the slope of Park Avenue ramping up and then 79th Street ramping down. So we have, let me clean up my Zoom screen here. So you're seeing, depending on where you are, this is a view from almost near 80th Street. I think the mock-up is probably a little bit better for visibility just because the wood is brighter than the color that we're going to paint it. But you're seeing maybe a quarter of it from this view, maybe a quarter of it from the south. And then,
So the parapet
again,
is about 2.5 feet high?
yeah, there's a railing there also. So it's about 2.5 feet high. Yeah.
So you're seeing about 7 feet of it.
Let me go to the elevation. It's probably, yeah, this is the section. So you're seeing about somewhere between 1/2 and 2/3 of the upper section. So 6 or 7 feet above the parapet.
Okay, that was my question. Anyway, I can support this. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, one last question. Are you putting lighting out there?
Yeah, so there are lights shown here. They're down lights that are aimed away from the street. So when you're looking up at this from the street, you're not going to see light, but it's going to light the deck area.
So it'll be a down lights.
terrace.
Is this part of
Down
the
lights.
application? Are the lights part of the application?
The lights are part of the design, but not part of the commissioner's review. So, I mean, it's on the drawing, so I'm happy to talk about it, but it's not a specific element of what the commissioners are reviewing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Next, we have Gail.
Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. Did you say that the windows will be Marvin wood windows? Or
No, I was saying Marvin makes a product that's a metal clad wood window. So it's aluminum on the outside and wood on the inside. These are going to be all wood. So the metal clad wood window, which I have in my own apartment, they're a very nice window, but because of the differential materials, they're not the same quality as a solid wood window. So what we're proposing is a solid custom made wood window, which is it's a higher quality window than a Marvin window.
excellent. And also, given that the dimensions and the profiles all match, I have no issue, so I can support the application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth.
Yes, I think you've done an extremely respectful proposal, and I think you probably can't get steel windows that would be of the necessary quality for up here. So I think wood is a good thing, and it quite honestly, because of the height of this proposal, I don't think that anybody other than the pigeons is going to be able to distinguish between wood and metal clad windows up there. So I think you're high enough that I really wouldn't have to apply the highest standards, but I don't have to. I think you've done a very good job here, and I will certainly support it. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony, Marco has his hand raised. Do you want to?
Yes, I know. Oh, sure. Go ahead, Marco.
Okay.
Thank you. I would like to propose a motion. I don't know.
Oh, no,
I
we're
think-
not done yet, Marco.
No, the motion can be presented, but you can keep
okay.
talking. Okay, the motion is to present it. If somebody second, that would be fine. But I would like to make a comment. The comment is basically I'm still supporting the application. The only thing is the professional, I think he's not going to have a very good sleep from now on, because Michelle, without even understand what is lateral loads. And when you have this column of this height, you must tie a 1/3 of the light. Otherwise, the lateral movement is going to be a nightmare. And it means Michelle, she touched something, but it's not part of the purview, but you should, the professional should be aware of that. And finally, now we will be more aware because he cannot claim that it was a mistake. Now he knows exactly what is the issue. And the other part is, I like the sustainability. I love to hear that you put wood. The only thing is I'm still seeing that it's not completely sustainable because I saw the details and doesn't resolve the problems of air leakage. But again, it's beautiful, the project, and we'll support. And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Next
thank you,
we
Marco.
have John.
Yes, I would support it as well.
Thank you. And Kimberly.
Thank you, Sayeda. Thank you, Anthony. And Kaz, thank you so much for how thorough this presentation is. I specifically wanted to call out how much I appreciate all of these details about the lighting, because I was Googling the lumen scale and all of that. And so I'm very pleased that even though we're adding lights here, based on what you have here, it's not as intrusive, but as Elizabeth said, it's high enough that it really doesn't make that much of a difference, even though I think this is a very tasteful job. So I appreciate it and I can support this.
I think Jane.
Go ahead, Jane.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you for helping us out tonight. I will support the application. I second everything that Elizabeth said, and I so appreciated the humor of mentioning the pigeons and what they will see. So I will support. Thank you.
Okay, and I just have two things. This is fine, and one interesting detail here that has not gone that ought not be unnoticed is that the screens are on the inside, which means that the windows will retain their original appearance, and you won't even get that sort of weird shadow from a screen on the outside, which is typically where you would find a screen in a double hung window. And I think that one of the other things is that this replacement, and any of the replacements, even if they had decided to go with the either of the building approved versions, the original windows were, of course, single glazed, and so these will provide much better thermal performance than the original windows did, and undoubtedly much better than the original windows do now. So obviously, I can support this. Now, Marco has made a motion to approve as presented. Is there a second?
I see a second from Gail and Alita and Michelle.
Okay, so I guess we go to a vote.
Okay.
Can we remove the screen share? Could we remove the screen share?
Sorry. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everyone confirm unmuting. You should see it popping up shortly. Okay, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Gail? Gail?
Yes.
Okay, Michelle?
Yes.
Alita?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Marco?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Great, unanimous approval. Thanks, everyone.
So we're going to move right along to our third application, which is 1312 Madison Avenue, the Carnegie Hill.
Oops. Jane, you've become muted.
Did you hear
There you
me?
go.
Oh, should I
Now
start
we
over?
can. Yeah.
Sorry. This is 1312 Madison Avenue, the Carnegie Hill Historic District. It's an application for the legalization of an existing awning and air conditioning unit. Is the applicant here?
Yes. One second, I'll confirm unmuting.
Okay, so we can, okay, and we can hear from the applicant now. They may wish to screen share.
Yes, I'll be doing it for her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hi, let me start video, just a sec. Here we go. There I am. Good evening, everybody, and thank you. Can you hear me? Okay?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. I'm Alta Indelman. This presentation was prepared by my office, Alta Indelman Architect. I realized that I was supposed to write that on the front cover and we didn't, but it's our first time at Community Board 8, and thank you for allowing us to make this presentation. We were retained by the current tenant of the restaurant at Hiramasa. There are a number of issues on the at the storefront that were not pre-approved by Landmarks prior to installation. The awning and the air conditioning unit, which is causing the unusual shape of the awning, are the items that need to go to public hearing. The other items on the violation that were installed without permit are being redesigned and addressed at staff level at the Landmarks Commission. So we don't need to review those. We're removing the granite that's in question and changing the lights and the menu board and so forth to be fully compliant with Landmarks, and staff is able to handle that at staff level. The next slide, if you would please, Said, and thank you for helping. The location of the building is on the corner. This storefront is at the corner at 93rd Street on the block on the west side of Madison Avenue, on the block that is between 92nd and 93rd Street. The building was built in 1897 as a hotel. The upper part of the building looks like 1897 detailing. The ground floor appears to have been redone, and the folks at Landmarks agree that it was probably a 1930s or Deco intervention at the ground floor. It's uniformly done across the entire bottom floor. It's either cast stone or limestone, and the individual storefronts have evolved over the years. Next slide. The current condition is an awning that looks pretty good from the front. It's got a good color and graphics and so forth. It extends side to side wider than the storefront, which is non-compliant with Landmarks regulations. It is somewhat boxier than their normal proportions, and it has a closed bottom with a mesh and closed sides with mesh to conceal the exterior air conditioning units. And you can go to the next slide, Said. Thank you. The condition at this storefront seems to have evolved, and we don't really have a clear history of exactly what happened, who did it, or when. The current tenant has been there since around Thanksgiving of 2021. The air conditioning units were in place already. One of them apparently was swapped out at some period of time between when the photographs were taken for Bistro Francais and what is there now. The landlord does not have a record of exactly who or when that was done. It seems to have been some kind of a emergency swap out of a unit that either wasn't working or was undersized, probably during the pandemic, and it wasn't noticed. So we don't really have a culprit here exactly, but the current tenant did install the awning to cover the existing condition, and they did so without a permit. And we're humbly requesting that it be considered to remain in place. You can go to the next slide. This particular building is it's a residential building above. It's built full. There's no yard or setback adjacent to this particular storefront. So they're in a little bit of a bind as to how to install the condenser portion of the air conditioning system for the interior restaurant. You'll notice that on the north facade, there's solid stone or cast stone, and the storefront on the storefront facade is relatively low. There does not appear to be any location where they can put louvers for interior application, short of a rather extensive renovation, both interior and exterior, which is why we are trying to stay with the exterior unit and see what can be approved in the existing scenario. You can move the slide, Saidi, thank you. Here are some additional views, some adjacencies. You can see the stone on the facade goes all the way up to the sill of the second floor. The storefronts are suppressed, they're lower. And you can go to the next one. These are context photos. We have some views of the block on both sides, and neighboring, we're just showing where those photographs are taken. You can move to the next one. You'll see that the other buildings on this side of the street are lower, and as such, lower and smaller, old brownstone, similar, some one-story. As such, they have opportunities to put air conditioning equipment either on a low roof in a yard. We do not have access to any of that at this storefront on the corner, and there's no realistic way to go through all the apartments above to get any kind of piping to a condenser unit on the top roof, and the top roof is dedicated to recreation space for the condominium. And so it looks like this is a particularly challenging location for locating air conditioning equipment. You can go to the next slide, Saida. Additional streetscape. And then the tax photographs, which confirm the stone that appears to be everywhere except at the limited storefront locations. So the idea of easily swapping in an interior condenser unit that requires significant louver space would necessitate some type of significant renovation. Next slide. This is the landmarks slide that indicates the type of awnings that are permissible. This awning does not comply in a number of respects. Next slide. This slide shows the storefront in some detail. It's a charming storefront. And you can see that there's not a particularly easy way to install louvers in that storefront, but it also shows you the mesh bottom and the mesh side, which are concealing the air conditioning equipment. Next slide, please. And lo and behold, this is what's up there. So there are two units there. The white one, AC1, appears to have been existing for some period of time. It is more compact, but as I described later in some of my alternative studies, it's a side venting unit, which requires significant clearances from side to side. The unit that was most recently swapped in, that is the mystery unit as to when exactly that took place and who did it, is AC2. And it's a pretty chunky piece of equipment, sort of similar to a residential unit you might see in someone's yard. The only advantage to it is that it exhausts radially, and so it doesn't require quite as much clearance space around it. So even though AC1 looks compact, by the time you put the clearances around it, it is a rather chunky shape if one wants to conceal it. But you can see that the closed bottom is not opaque, and so it's not quite as heavy as one might expect, and the side panels similarly are not opaque. You can move the slide. The previous condition was an awning. The previous condition on the left did not yet have unit 2 that was swapped in later, but whatever the equivalent unit 2 was before the swap out didn't fit under the awning very well, and they cut a big hole in it. So that, I guess, was not exactly what the new store owner wanted to see, and they went ahead and did something that concealed the units. Next slide, please. The interior of the restaurant, it's entirely built out. It's been there for some time. It's a voluminous space. It has a fairly large cooling load. Typically, these restaurants of this size with this type of volume with cooking and meals and so forth require about 8 to 12 tons of air conditioning. Currently, we've assessed that they have approximately 8 tons of air conditioning. Any kind of, you can see the storefront in the slide on the left, looking towards the front. You can see what the height of the storefront is and where there might be the potential for any kind of opening. It's extremely limited. And above that, we believe abuts a stone facade. Next slide, please. Oops. Next, there we go. Once again, as I've already iterated, this is a building that has at the bottom, at the corner, stone everywhere that one might want to put louvers. The rest of this, I believe I've covered. You can continue. Next slide, please. Thank you. We looked, go back to the previous one. Thanks. We lots of verbiage here, lots of explanations of how we came up with 3 alternative schemes that we studied very carefully as to what, short of some significant renovation and rethinking of how this air conditioning can get exterior air exposure with louvers. There is no place to put the rooftop unit, to put either an interior unit or some other type of exterior unit is challenging. And we went through 3 alternatives. This is a verbal description of those. I needn't read it. I can show you on the slides of what each one would be. To swap out the chunky unit and try to reduce, as Landmarks has asked us, try to reduce the profile of the awning and the width of it. Next slide, please. Our first attempt is to swap out unit 2. This is the existing scheme. Okay, so this shows you exactly the dotted lines, show you where AC1 is and AC2. AC1 requires side-to-side ventilation. AC2 is more or less in the round. From the front, it doesn't look quite as jarring. From the side, it's chunky, but it doesn't hang lower. That's what's there now. Next slide, please. Our first alternate scheme that we studied is to swap out unit 2, the chunky unit 2, for a slimmer version. There is a slimmer version. We assess unit 2 to be a 5-ton unit. There is a slimmer version. However, it's very tall. And that's complicates matters. So we don't feel that swapping out that unit with this slimmer, it's called a suitcase type unit. This suitcase type unit doesn't help us too much because of the required clearances and the height. Next slide, please. Alternate scheme 2 takes unit 1 and replicates it into 3 unit 1s, 3-ton units. These are the smallest exterior units that could be swapped in for the type of air conditioning system that already exists at the interior infrastructure. It looks like a winner until you look at the side elevation and the clearances. And because of the side outlet of the air on these units, one could not compress the awning to be within the shape, the size of the storefront. The stretched out version remains the necessary dimension, and the shape is still pretty boxy. Next slide, please. Lastly, we looked at what would have to happen if we put an interior condenser unit in the space with, once again, the existing interior component of the air conditioning system is already enclosed in interior finishes and so forth. We did not study a full-blown interior renovation or a full-blown exterior renovation. That would be rather harsh for a small business to take on for this particular purpose. In order to put a louver at the exterior, the size of the louver would need to be with the existing storefront. We can't use the curved components, and the door is set back, so that doesn't work either because one needs to back the condenser unit directly towards the louver. The louver would be rather large, tall shape that appears to intrude on the stone, and that looks pretty disruptive, and we don't think it works. The interior is challenging as well, but I don't think the exterior works at all unless there were complete renovation of the entire storefront. They would need to redo the entire storefront and provide extensive louver space, flatten it out. It's another level of renovation than this particular condition seems to warrant at this time. Next slide, please. And there we are again with the previous one showing the unit with the hole. That's not the unit that's there currently on the left-hand side, and the current condition showing probably the absolute worst view of it. It's pretty exaggerated in this photograph because it's close-up shot. You don't really quite experience it that badly in person. Next slide, please. And we have some photographs of additional storefronts in the neighborhood that have various types of awnings. Landmarks Commission tells me that some of these have violations. We're not sure which do, but there does seem to be a rather mixed bag of conditions along the streetscape. Next slide, please. Again, there's this in context. And next. Next slide, please, Saida. Thank you. And in conclusion, we think, short of a absolute major exterior and interior renovation, that what's there now is probably less terrible than if we A, removed the awning, or B, opened the bottom and opened the sides, which is then we'd have the boxy shape with more visibility of the units. And so we rest our case asking for lenience on this particular condition because of the nature of the small business and the difficulty of trying to solve this another way. Be happy to take questions.
I think we'll first go to see whether anyone from the public is present.
I'm not seeing any raised hands.
There's somebody.
I see Lo is here. I'm sure he,
raising a hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Lo. You should see a prompt to confirm unmuting.
Thank you.
Go
Thank you.
ahead, Lo.
Okay, my name is Lo Vandervalk. I'm speaking on behalf of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. We're not happy with either alternative presented, meaning attaining full compliance would subject the owner to an inordinate expense, including downtime, yet approval creates an undesirable precedent. We think a better alternative is to allow for an extension of the existing condition by 5 or 6 years. The units were purchased several years ago. I believe the current owner took it over from a previous tenant. In 5 or 6 years, there will likely be better technology and very likely smaller units available at that time. So that compliance can likely then be more easily achieved. I've been in touch with LPC staff, and they are favorably inclined to some kind of an extension of the existing conditions, but I can't speak for them, of course, but it's not totally pie in the sky to ask what we're seeking. We've of course discussed this with Michelle, the owner, and I've been in touch with the architect, who's made a very compelling presentation, although it is very technical and it seems to point to a case closed, that there is no alternative, but we think there could be an alternative if that was the purpose, to bring this into fuller compliance in a way that does not create a huge bulky situation at a very important corner in Carnegie Hill. So, but we do recognize the unusual circumstances of the COVID pandemic, and we are in a way grateful to this restaurant owner for opening the restaurant under difficult circumstances. He has also 2 other restaurants. He is serving the community admirably, and we can't discount that. However, what we're proposing is an unusual proposal, not a simple yes or no decision, which CB8 has observed in the past. To the best of my knowledge, LPC does not require a yes or no vote, but it wants to hear CB8's reaction. So proposing extension of the existing conditions by 5 or 6 years, if that is what CB8 sees as the best solution, is therefore a useful viewpoint for the LPC to hear. Thank you very much.
Saeed, is anyone else from the public present?
We have Nina, who has a question. Go ahead, Nina.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Could you give your address where you live, Nina?
Yes, I'm at 26 East 93rd, which is the building that Hiramasa is located in. And I'm just here to express my support for the business. And I don't know the details of how the awning should be, but I know that they are a restaurant on my block and they're struggling, and I want to support them. I feel lucky that we have their restaurant in our building, and I think that they add to the streetscape, and I see that it's a difficult situation. And I just want to express my support and that of everyone in my building.
Oh,
Okay.
Nina, now I recognize you.
Nice to see you.
Okay, I guess we can go on to members of the committee. Elizabeth? Oh, I know it's 8 o'clock.
Could you put me at the end? The dog walker is about to arrive and you're going to be barked out of the meeting, so.
Okay. All right, next we have Gail.
Actually, the architect has really shown such due diligence. It's not as if they are unwilling to have a solution. There, unfortunately, at this point in time, there doesn't appear to be one without a massive renovation. And I just do not think for having this type of awning, although it's not necessarily appropriate, that it's so egregious. Particularly, I live in the area, so I walk back and forth on Madison a lot. And probably a lot of the other awnings, frankly, are non-complying as well. But what I do like is Lowe's suggestion. If we can at least go ahead and give approval for a set amount of time, that's one thing. But on the other hand, I wonder, whether there will be anything that is innovative down the road. So given the thought that the architect has worked very diligently to try to have a solution, we know that this is a good neighbor. My feeling is that I'd be probably inclined to support in some way keeping the awning as it is.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, it may not be part of our purview, but for my own curiosity, have you looked at either split systems or air conditioning coming up through the floor? Do you have a vault or a basement?
We don't have that ability because there's no way to get the fresh air into below the space. The split system units require exterior, all condenser units require exterior air. Currently, the city and the industry is moving towards heat pump units. And those are becoming more and more popular, and they're becoming, as Lo was saying, there are innovations happening every day. And some of these old systems are being not exactly phased out, they're supported, but the options are limited for swapping out a condenser. And so a real design effort would have to be made with the available technology at the time to figure it out. So a split system, that just changes how the air is distributed at the interior of the space, not necessarily removes the necessity of having an outdoor, any kind of a condenser has to expel hot air and fresh air has to be brought in. And somehow or other, there has to be exterior exposure. And because of the, we'd have to study the stone. Is there a way to put a louver in the stone? I mean, it's one of those kinds of things. And with the technology, hopefully the units get smaller, flatter, narrower, different ways of expelling the air. We were not able to find something that could be swapped in directly without, a complete redesign at this point.
If you had the split
other than what
system
we showed.
inside and you had the venting where the current air conditioners are, you would have a much smaller version. Couldn't you vent through there without having just a vent space through there?
No, the whole issue is that the condensers require significant louver space for 8 tons of air conditioning at a minimum. It's really quite significant. What would have to happen if I were the architect for doing this renovation down the road, I would have to redesign the storefront to have space. I'd have to completely redesign the storefront to have space for significant louvers to have an interior condenser of some type, unless exterior condensers became shorter, narrower, flatter that we could conceal under an awning. It's a challenging thing to do.
And is there a vault or a basement under this restaurant?
I'm not aware of that. It's in a residential building. I don't believe so. And once again, if there were, there's no way to expel exterior air from a subterranean
Well, there
space.
could be on the side where you have the base of the building. If you look on the is it the 93rd Street corner? Or
93rd Street is a
93rd.
solid, right.
If you
But-
look at I think it's a marble, a granite base. If you look at that, if in fact there is a basement or a vault, if in fact that's the case, you could put a unit under there and just put vents in the floor of the restaurant and have it vented out the side. But look, I'm certainly not an expert. I'm not even an architect, so I'm not here to redesign for you, but I'm just, because that wasn't considered as an option, I just wanted to know if you have considered it.
I'm sorry, it's not an option because the floor of the restaurant is right at, it's only a few inches above the sidewalk. And so there's no basement extent. I know what you mean. And in some buildings, as a matter of fact, in the building where my office is, we have that kind of elevated basement space that pokes up with windows above the sidewalk. I'm in an 1895 building and we have that kind of thing. And I know exactly what you mean. And I wish we had this, but there are 2 issues with it. One is that you're not allowed to expel hot air at that level because you'd be blowing it out on people on the sidewalk. But potentially there would be a snow issue where it could get blocked, but we don't have that opportunity here because the floor, if you look at the front elevation, the floor of the restaurant actually is on the it's virtually at sidewalk level, just a hair above, and there is not an extension of the basement where you could put a vent of any size.
That could be
in that
vented out back
location.
into a courtyard, but if
You
you
would
don't have,
to-
if you don't have the
we
room,
don't
you
have
don't
a
have,
courtyard,
you
no.
don't
We need
have
to
it.
move along.
It's a challenge. I
Yeah,
just want to
hear.
clarify, I apologize, I didn't mean to speak over you. I wasn't retained to redesign the entire thing, but rather to analyze the existing condition and rationalize it. So, but as in the process of so doing, because of the necessity of going through some very technical options, the Landmarks Commission required us to do that and encouraged us to do that. We really did get into a lot of design issues, consulting with our engineers, getting actual models and units to get sizes and clearances required, and we didn't do so well. So, that's where we
Well,
are.
as presented, I would support,
We just need to move along here.
I would support the application with the thoughts that Lo had about it being for a certain amount of years and then be up for review again. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, who's next, Aida?
Next, we have Alita.
Thank you. I would support what Lo said, but I would also ask that if it's possible, and recognizing that the owner is struggling financially, perhaps, that if it's possible to redo the awning itself and match it in color to an awning that is in compliance, just for uniformity's sake. And also it's nice not to have a hodgepodge. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita.
Thank you. Next, we have Sarah.
Hi. I too like the sound of Lo's proposal that I don't know if we're able to suggest a revisiting or a time frame for the application, but I think approval of this application with an opportunity to revisit, I think, would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we
May I
have.
clarify one tiny thing? The color of the awning is not in violation. The color is okay. The graphics are okay. So it's not about the color. The Landmarks Commission has no problem with the color.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Marco.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. You said these two units are a condenser. Is that correct? Or compressor? Is that correct?
The terms are often used interchangeably. I'm using the term condenser.
Condenser.
It's the outdoor component of a split air conditioning system where there's an air handler at the interior. There's an air handler at the interior that has ductwork connected to it.
Yeah, this is a compressor what you have outside, period. 1. 2, I would like to know that you have three walls. They are completely sealed. On the left, you have a tenant. On the back, you have something that is completely sealed. And on the right side, which is the street, they have no windows at all. Is that correct?
The restaurant has two exterior elevations. One is a blank wall on the 93rd Street side that's solid limestone or cast stone. And there's the side that has the storefront. Those are the only exterior exposures.
Yeah, the exposure basically you have is in the front, in the front facade. This window. That's the only thing exposure that you have.
That's the only opening currently in the facade that's exposed, correct?
Okay, so now the issue is next. I think your approach is wrong, and I'm going to oppose this application. Let me explain you why. First of all, let me explain you how it works, an air condition. An air condition is technical and then basically establish the bulk of the unit. And the issue is very simple. The system uses a gas extremely sensitive to the heat, and they catch in the evaporated system. Then with a thin, a quarter-inch pipe, they bring to the compressor outside. That's what you described. That's correct. And that over there, with a little bit air, they compress. Exactly, the name is compress. When they compress, they have a quality. The temperature rise incredible. And then you put a fan and they release the heat. So you pull out the heat from inside, you throw outside.
Marco, we're here for context and
I'm
appropriateness in the
going in that
application
direction.
in front of us.
I'm going in that direction. I'm trying to demonstrate that the window, the unit outside is wrong. Is erroneously put the size, and there is a system that you can do better, period. So when you put the air outside, one of the conditions of the condenser, you need to have fresh air, you need to have a ventilation completely. Once you uncover under the awning, you lose the capability, so the system doesn't work very well. So then you need another unit because one unit is working poorly. So you need a second, and
Marco,
probably
you
you
can
need a
vote.
third one.
Marco,
And the size of the unit is excessive, because that's what I'm asking. This
Marco, you can vote against the application. Thank you.
Okay, let's go back to Elizabeth.
I've been to, not to this restaurant, but I've been to about 4 or 5 restaurants that have been there. I've never had a heat stroke. So they must have somehow air conditioned the place. So I just wondered if you could look into the history and ask previous restaurants who were there how they solved this problem, because I want to support you, and I just, and I don't want to make you go redo it if there is an easy, I want you to find an easy solution to make this acceptable. So in this day with restaurants, I hate to vote against them. I don't like to vote for things that I don't think are appropriate. So I'm a little bit on the fence here. But perhaps you could find a solution that other people, maybe you don't need all the air conditioning that you put in. Maybe there is somebody else must have done it before. So I hope you can look into something that would solve the problem easily. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. John?
I think that Lowe has given you an ideal interim solution for this. And some might say that it's kicking the can down the road, but 5 or 6 years, as he points out, is a lot of time in which better, newer, more efficient technologies can be developed. And this restaurant owner sounds like a good neighbor who is struggling and everyone wants to see survive. So I would certainly go with Lowe's solution.
Thank you. And next we have Kimberly.
I'll be very brief.
Thank you, John. I know Marco has his hand up again, but I want to see if anyone else is.
Yes, Kimberly is going. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Sorry, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I just wanted to say I echo some of the sentiments that are, originally expressed by Lowe and this committee. Some of us seem to be in alignment that, and again, kicking the can down the road isn't great, but I agree that, this applicant seems to be with it between a rock and a hard place, and I'm empathetic. And so I would agree that extending what we have now until a better solution can be put in place is probably the ideal. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Saida.
No problem.
So is everyone?
Yes.
Except for Marco, who has his hand up.
I haven't said
And I
anything
haven't
yet.
spoken yet, but we'll go.
Oh, sorry, Anthony.
That's all right. It's quite all right. Basically, what I wanted to say is that I don't even think kicking the can down the road is an unfortunate outcome. I think here it really is the ideal solution. I'm relatively insensitive to awnings, especially when they're covering up air conditioning units. And so I would be inclined to support this application, but I think giving it a pause, which to wait for technology to catch up to the problem of 8 tons of air conditioning in a 4-ton bag is, I think, a good one. That was it.
Thank you. Saida, could we go back to Marco now? Has everyone spoken except for me, I think?
Yes. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Marco.
Thank you. I think I find it unfair to explain what is the point that she's claiming. She's claiming that she needs to have a bulky a compressor, and she's wrong. She doesn't understand. I'm sorry to say that is straightforward. Otherwise, they're gonna cut me. The point is right here is very simple. These systems, it has to work a full ventilation. There is a system that works properly. If you call any manufacturer, it will tell you that you are wrong to put a awning covering the compressor. That is one part. The other part is ventilation, which basically, you don't address that part. And that's what you have. And we don't address that part because we assume that it's resolved or not resolved. But the point is, you don't need 8 tons for this is, I'm asking you, the 3 walls is you don't need, because you don't lose energy at all, almost at all. The only thing that you lose is in the frontage. Therefore, the size of the units are excessive, and it's excessive because of the units are in the middle, are covered and do not have the ventilation. Once you don't have the ventilation, the gas that change from gas to liquid do not work properly. If it doesn't work properly, you need to keep adding more tons in order to satisfy, because the first one doesn't work properly and never work. And I understand very well. I understand all the systems, and I have a deep training in that part. And therefore, I think you are wrong. I'm sorry to say that.
Marco, I'm going to cut you. Marco, we're cutting you off. I'm sorry. Anthony, did you want to make another comment before I speak? Go ahead.
Very brief. I am a professional architect. I went to school as long as everybody else did. I have been working for over 40 years in New York City, and I would not presume to question anyone's calculations as to how much air conditioning they need. And the reason this awning has a mesh bottom and mesh sides is so that the units will be ventilated properly. That's it.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'll just make one, if I may, just really, really quick. I do a lot of restaurant work. I did not design the system. However, the restaurants create their cooling load from the interior, from the people, the hot meals, the kitchen. There's a lot of heat generated inside a restaurant. That's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you so much. And I appreciate the complexity of this application. And I'm not an expert on air conditioning, but I think it's true what Anthony said previously. This is a tough nut to crack because, as you know, we usually vote an application up or down. In this case, Lowe, who represents Carnegie Hill Neighbors, his idea is that we have some kind of a compromise where the applicant is allowed for 5 or 6 years to keep the existing condition, and then it gets revisited. I'm not sure how we write a resolution that reflects that, because we do not want to set a precedent by supporting the existing condition in toto, nor do we want to totally deny the application because there is this idea that a compromise might be the best way to go. Anthony, do you have any ideas on how to write a resolution in this situation?
Well, how about something like this? That we have a resolution to approve the application with the proviso that it be approved for a specific period of time, and let's say 6 years, just to make it 6 years. That it be approved on a temporary approved on a provisional basis for 6 years, and then obviously the applicant has to come back in 6 years and see where they are. I mean, don't you think
Well,
we can
that
say it that
sounds
way?
great to me. Is there a precedent for that kind of a resolution? Is there a precedent that you know of?
No, I don't, but we do things like that all the time where we say yes, but.
Okay, well, what, okay. Well, not as complete, not in this form. I'm not familiar with it at all. I'm going to go to Elizabeth, then I'm going to go to Michelle. Then we're going to formulate the resolution based on what Anthony has just said and have a vote, because it's, I think we owe that to the applicant. Elizabeth, what did you want to say?
Landmarks gives temporary permits, and the temporary permit is, certain amount of time here and a certain amount of time there. So I think that Anthony's and everybody else's good suggestions about this time, just let's say we will approve a temporary permit for 5 or 6 years.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That makes more sense to me. Thank you, Elizabeth. Michelle.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think this is so unusual or we need a precedent or anything like that. I think this is what's coming out of the committee. This is what we're saying. But I think that you should include in the whereases the reasons for this.
Mm-hmm.
And, in other words, there has to be a reason for this conclusion. And I think you want to say 6 years, I would say 5 years, and that it come back to the community board. I would make sure that that's stated. And, and then go on from there. But I don't think there's anything extraordinary about having this kind of a resolution. But I would put in the reasons, I think you have to be pretty specific about why.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I'll be honest, I've been on the committee for years, as you guys know. This is a little bit unusual, but I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, well, I've been on it since 2006. And my only point is that we don't need a precedent to have a resolution like this. It's common in all other kinds of purviews. Just because you don't remember us doing it, or I may or may not.
Well, thank you.
Doesn't matter. Thank you.
I think we can go to a vote.
Okay, 1 second while I unmute everyone. Confirm unmuting on your side, please, everyone. Elizabeth?
This is for a 5-year temporary permit?
Yes.
Yes, a 5-year temporary permit.
Gail?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Alita?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Marco?
No.
John?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
Said,
very
and thank
much.
you for our help this evening. I do have an item of new business I wanted to bring up, but I'll first hear from Alita. Alita?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was still unmuted. Yes, the congestion pricing infrastructure is being put up all over the place, including Park Avenue, possibly Madison Avenue, possibly Fifth Avenue, historic districts. And I just wanted to raise it as an individual, not as co-chair of the congestion pricing task force. They're putting up the polls. It will be intrusive. Someone raised at the congestion pricing task force meeting, actually, that we objected to the G5, whatever those things were called, polls. And I'm just asking that it be on the agenda for next month about a discussion of whether these are appropriate as is in historic districts.
Alita, that's fine. Do we have images of them, or do we know what they look like or anything like that?
I'll see if I could dig up some images, or maybe Saida could. I think there have been drawings and there's a list of the sites as they're putting them up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
Every
for bringing
block,
that.
yeah.
forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marco, did you want to say something before I go to our item of new business? Go ahead,
Yes, thank you.
Marco.
Since I was alluded, I have to answer this allusion to what Anthony said. I think he's a little bit older than me, but I have almost the same years of experience. It's true, when I learned, at least in my country where I learned, I don't use air conditioning. So for me, it was new when I came to this country about more than 10 years.
Marco,
So the
we've
question
already
is,
voted on that.
no, I'm asking something that Anthony said, so I need to make to clarify what is my position, because he's saying something, and I think the voting is over, the application is over. But since he alluded, so I had to address some parts. That's it.
Well, briefly.
Briefly. Okay, so now when I came right here, then I learned that the air conditioner is a big system right here. And actually, in reality, it was an explosion 15 years ago in this country that is coming for the issue of sustainability. And that forced us to all professionals to go back to school and learn new techniques and new systems, especially to become an expert in air conditioning. And this is why
Okay, I'm going to go to our item of new business. I'm sorry, I just don't feel we need to have more of a discussion on the minutia of air conditioning units. We've already passed our resolution. I think it was a great resolution, and it certainly supports Lowe's position in Carnegie Hill Neighbors. Now, this is an application that will be coming to us, 854 Fifth Avenue. Peter Penoyer has been chosen as the architect for the work that's to be done on this Warren and Wetmore mansion, one of the few mansions still left on Fifth Avenue. I believe it's going to be a 74-711 application. Peter and his team, which includes Ghetto and DeMille, which, as you guys know, is like a government public relations firm, are willing to give a tour of the site, the building, this beautiful building, to committee members who are interested in going. It would be on Thursday, October 5th at around 4:30 in the afternoon. And I'm not sure, this is very interesting history. It used to be the headquarters for the Yugoslav government in New York City, the consul general's residence. Plus, of course, it was used for diplomatic meetings, etc. when Tito was in charge of Yugoslavia. As you know, Yugoslavia was divided into 5 separate countries. The house got sold recently for $50 million. The proceeds of the sale, the $50 million, had to be divided among the 5 governments, or the 5 existing countries that make up the former Yugoslavia, country of Yugoslavia. Very interesting historical, well, the building has a very interesting history. And I think that it would be interesting for anyone who's interested to go on this tour. Unfortunately, they didn't really offer us an alternative date except for Friday, October 6th. So I just wondered if anybody is interested. I'm not sure when it's calendared for landmarks, but if anybody's interested, I'd love to see a show of hands. Anthony's interested, Alita's interested. So that's 2. Marco's interested is 3. Gail's interested is 4. Nina Nevens, you're not a member of the community board. I'm not sure whether other people are included in this visit, but I'm happy to find out. This is a chance to actually be given a tour of this incredibly historic mansion on Fifth Avenue. Normally, I don't really think we should go. You know, we should see the application as presented, as we do with all applications. We had an opportunity to see the Frick, but David and I just decided not to go and didn't pursue it. But John, you'd be interested. So I think we have like 4 or 5 people who really would like to go. So I will relay that information to, oh, and Sarah would like to go. Great. I will relay that information to Peter Penoyer's office and see if we can set it in stone and an email to all of you. I just think it would be a fun sort of site visit for all of us. We rarely do this kind of thing, but it will be an unusual application when it comes to us, and it might be fun to see the building beforehand. Anybody have any other comments? Gail, I see Gail's hand is up. Is there a move to adjourn? I see no other hands. Anthony, a move to adjourn. Seconded by Alita, with a thumbs up from Sarah. And okay, well, thank you all very much for a most interesting evening once again. And we'll see you all at the full board in person this Wednesday night. And Nina, nice to see you. I texted my daughter Lily that I saw you on Zoom. My daughter Lily is a very good friend of Nina Nevens, who's owns the building where that restaurant is located. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all on Wednesday.
Good night.
Good night.